The stars were supposed to bring us together. That's what they told us anyway. When the first signals came in from beyond our solar system, humanity erupted in celebration. We weren't alone. The universe was alive, teeming with civilizations far older and wiser than ours. They called themselves the Galactic Council, a coalition of species spanning thousands of worlds, united in peace and prosperity. They offered us a seat at their table, a chance to join their grand alliance. It was everything we'd ever dreamed of. But dreams have a way of turning into nightmares. It started with a simple disagreement. A misunderstanding, really. The council had rules, strict, unyielding rules, about how new species were to integrate into their society. We were expected to follow their protocols, to abandon certain technologies, to restructure our governments, to conform to their vision of order. And at first we tried. We really did. But humanity has never been good at following someone else's script. We're stubborn, rebellious, and fiercely independent. It's in our DNA. And that's what scared them. The breaking point came during a routine diplomatic meeting. One of their ambassadors made a demand that would have required us to dismantle our military, to leave ourselves defenseless. For the greater good, they said. For peace. But peace at what cost? Our delegation refused. The room went silent. The ambassador's face, or what passed for a face, twisted into something cold and unreadable. You will comply, they said, their voice like ice. Or you will face the consequences. What happened next changed everything. Humanity walked away. Not just from the meeting but from the council itself. We withdrew our ambassadors, cut off communications, and turned our backs on the stars. The galaxy watched in shock. No species had ever dared to defy the council. No species had ever been so bold, so reckless, so human. And that's when the rumors started. Whispers of a hidden agenda, of secrets buried deep within the council's archives. Whispers that maybe, just maybe, they weren't as benevolent as they claimed to be. But we didn't have time to dwell on that. We had our own problems to deal with. Earth was in chaos. Some celebrated our defiance, calling it a new dawn for humanity. Others feared the consequences, the wrath of a galaxy that had turned its back on us. And then there were those who saw an opportunity, a chance to seize power in the midst of the uncertainty. The world was divided, teetering on the edge of collapse. And all the while, the stars above seemed to grow colder, darker, more distant. Weeks turned into months, and the council's silence became deafening. We expected retaliation, some form of punishment for our insolence. But nothing came. It was as if they had forgotten us, erased us from their grand design. And maybe that was the worst part, the feeling of being insignificant, of being nothing more than a footnote in their history. But humanity has never been good at staying down. We rise. We fight. We survive. And deep down we knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Then one night the signals started again. Faint at first, almost imperceptible. But they were there. And they weren't coming from the council. They were coming from somewhere else, somewhere beyond their reach. The messages were fragmented, chaotic, filled with warnings and pleas for help. Whoever was sending them, they were desperate. And they were calling for us. Humanity. The species that had dared to say no. The species that had walked away. As the signals grew stronger, so did the tension. The council, it seemed, hadn't forgotten us after all. Their ships began to appear on the edges of our solar system, silent and ominous, like predators circling their prey. But this time we were ready. We had spent every waking moment preparing for this, for the moment when the stars would come crashing down. And now that moment was here. The fate of humanity hung in the balance. Would we stand our ground or would we fall? Would we find allies in the darkness, or were we truly alone? And what secrets lay hidden in the council's past, secrets that could change everything? The answers were out there, waiting among the stars. But time was running out. The council was coming. And they weren't coming to talk. The screen flickered, and the message appeared. Just 3 words, but they sent a chill through the room. They're not alone. The transmission cut out, leaving only static. And in that moment we realized the truth. This wasn't just about us. This was bigger than humanity, bigger than the council, bigger than anything we could have imagined. The galaxy was a far darker place than we had ever known. And we were about to step into the heart of the storm. But that's a story for another time. For now, all we can do is wait. And hope. Because out there, in the vast expanse of space, something is coming. Something that will change everything. And when it arrives, humanity will be ready. Or will be wiped out trying. The room was silent, save for the faint hum of the machinery that kept the station alive. The message, "They're not alone," hung in the air like a ghost refusing to fade. No one spoke. No one moved. It was as if the weight of those 3 words had pinned everyone to their seats. The implications were too vast, too terrifying to process all at once. Who wasn't alone? The council? Or something else entirely? And what did it mean for us? The man at the center of the room, the one who had been leading humanity's efforts to prepare for the council's return, finally broke the silence. His name wasn't important. What mattered was the look in his eyes, a mix of determination and fear that mirrored the emotions of everyone present. "We need answers," he said, his voice steady but low. "And we need them now." The team sprang into action. Engineers recalibrated the sensors, trying to trace the origin of the signal. Linguists and cryptographers pored over the fragmented messages, searching for patterns, for meaning. Historians dug through every record of the Council's interactions with other species, looking for clues, for anything that might explain what was happening. And all the while, the ships on the edge of our solar system remained motionless, watching, waiting. It didn't take long for the first breakthrough. The signal wasn't random. It was a distress call, but not in the traditional sense. It wasn't a plea for help from a single civilization. It was a warning meant for us. The fragments spoke of a force older than the Council, a force that had been hidden, suppressed, forgotten. The Council, it seemed, had been keeping secrets. Big ones. And now, those secrets were coming to light. The more we learned, the more the pieces began to fit together. The messages were too fragmented, too cryptic. They spoke of a shadow, of a void, of something that consumes and corrupts. It was like trying to piece together a nightmare from half-remembered fragments. And the more we tried, the more the fear grew. Because if the Council, with all their power and technology, were afraid of this thing, then what chance did we have? The tension on the station was palpable. Every new piece of information brought more questions than answers. And every hour that passed brought the Council's ships closer. They hadn't made a move yet, but it was only a matter of time. We could feel it. The waiting was unbearable. It was like sitting in the eye of a storm, knowing the worst was yet to come. And then, just when it seemed like the pressure would become too much, something changed. The signal stopped. Not gradually, not fading into static, but abruptly, as if someone, or something, had cut them off. The silence was worse than the messages. It was deafening. It was ominous. It felt like the calm before the storm. The team worked around the clock, trying to re-establish contact, to find out what had happened. But there was nothing. No signals, no messages, no signs of life. It was as if the galaxy itself had gone silent. And in that silence, the fear grew. Because if the signals had been a warning, then their absence could only mean one thing. It was too late. The man at the center of the room called for a meeting. Everyone gathered, their faces pale, their eyes hollow from lack of sleep. He didn't mince words. "We're running out of time," he said. "The Council ships are still out there, and whatever this shadow is, it's coming. We need to decide what we're going to do. We can't just sit here and wait for the end." The room erupted into arguments. Some wanted to reach out to the Council to try to negotiate, to form an alliance against this new threat. Others argued that the Council couldn't be trusted, that they had brought this on themselves by hiding the truth. A few even suggested that we should abandon Earth, take to the stars, and try to outrun whatever was coming. But no one had a clear answer. No one knew what to do. And then, just as the arguments were reaching their peak, the sensors picked up something. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A new signal. Different from the others. Stronger. Clear. And it was coming from inside our solar system. The room fell silent as the signal was played. It was a voice, human but distorted, as if it had traveled through something unnatural. The words were simple, but they sent a chill through everyone who heard them. "Find the key. It's the only way." No one knew what it meant. What key? Where was it? And what would it unlock? But one thing was clear. This wasn't random. This was a message meant for us. A message that could change everything. The man at the center of the room stood up, his face set in determination. "We need to find that key," he said. "Whatever it is, wherever it is, we need to find it. Because if we don't, then none of this will matter. The Council, the Shadow, the ships, it'll all be for nothing." And so, the search began. Teams were dispatched to every corner of the solar system, scouring planets, moons, and asteroids for any sign of the key. It was a desperate, almost hopeless task. But what other choice did we have? The fate of humanity, and maybe the entire galaxy, depended on it. As the team set out, the man stayed behind, staring at the stars through the station's observation window. He didn't know what was coming. None of us did. But he knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning. The real fight was still ahead. And when it came, humanity would be ready. Or we would die trying. The stars, once a symbol of hope and unity, now felt like a vast, unknowable void. But somewhere out there, hidden in the darkness, was the key. And we would find it. No matter what it took. No matter the cost. Because if we didn't, then the shadow would consume us all. And the galaxy would be lost forever. The search for the key consumed everything. Days turned into weeks, and the team scoured every inch of the solar system, from the icy rings of Saturn to the barren deserts of Mars. Every lead, no matter how small, was pursued with relentless determination. But the key remained elusive, a phantom slipping through our fingers no matter how close we thought we were. And all the while, the Council ships loomed on the edge of our system, silent and unmoving, like vultures waiting for their moment to strike. The tension was unbearable. Every transmission, every signal, every flicker of activity on the sensors sent hearts racing. Was this it? Was this the moment the Council would make their move? Or was it something worse, something we couldn't even imagine? The uncertainty gnawed at us, fraying nerves and testing resolve. But we couldn't afford to falter. Not now. Not when so much was at stake. Then, finally, a breakthrough. One of the teams on Europa, drilling through the moon's icy crust, found something. It wasn't the key, not exactly, but it was a clue, a fragment of an ancient artifact, covered in symbols that matched the ones from the fragmented messages. The artifact was old, impossibly old, predating even the Council. And it was clear that it wasn't of human origin. Whoever, or whatever, had left it here had done so long before humanity had even dreamed of reaching the stars. The artifact was brought back to the station, and the best minds we had went to work deciphering it. The symbols were unlike anything we'd ever seen, a language that seemed to shift and change the longer you looked at it. But slowly, painstakingly, we began to piece together its meaning. It spoke of a war that had raged across the galaxy long before the Council existed. A war against something they called the Voidborn. The Voidborn. The name sent shivers down spines. According to the artifact, they were not a species, not in the way we understood it. They were something else, a force of nature, a corruption that consumed everything in its path. The artifact described them as the shadow behind the stars, a darkness that had been sealed away eons ago by an alliance of civilizations. But the seal was weakening. And if it broke, the Voidborn would return. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. This was what the Council had been hiding. This was why they were so afraid of independent species, why they demanded conformity and control. They weren't just maintaining order. They were trying to prevent the seal from breaking. And now, with humanity's defiance, with our refusal to follow their rules, we had unwittingly set something in motion. Something that could doom us all. The man at the center of the room, the one who had been leading us through this nightmare, spoke first. "We need to find the key," he said, his voice heavy with urgency. "If the artifact is right, then the key is the only thing that can repair the seal. It's the only thing that can stop the Voidborn." But where was it? The artifact offered no clear answers, only riddles and fragments of a map that seemed to point to a location deep within the asteroid belt. It was a long shot, but it was all we had. And so, another team was dispatched, this one smaller, faster, and armed with everything we knew about the artifact and its symbols. As the team raced toward the asteroid belt, the rest of us waited, our eyes glued to the screens, our hearts pounding with a mix of hope and dread. The Council's ships were still out there, still silent, but their presence was a constant reminder of the stakes. If they knew what we were doing, if they knew about the Voidborn, then why weren't they helping us? Or were they waiting for us to fail, to prove that humanity was too reckless, too dangerous to be allowed to exist? The questions swirled, but there was no time to dwell on them. Because just as the team reached the asteroid belt, the signals started again. This time they weren't fragmented. They were clear. And they were coming from everywhere. The messages were the same: they're coming. The words echoed through the station, through every ship, through every mind. They're coming. The Voidborn. The shadow behind the stars. The thing that had been sealed away, the thing that could consume and corrupt everything in its path. They were coming. And we were running out of time. The team in the asteroid belt worked faster than ever, their hands trembling as they scanned every rock, every crevice, every shadow. The tension was unbearable. Every second felt like an eternity. And then, just when it seemed like they might never find it, they did. The key. It was small, unassuming, almost laughably so. But it pulsed with a strange, otherworldly energy, and the symbols on its surface matched those on the artifact. This was it. This was what we had been searching for. But as the team prepared to bring the key back, the sensors picked up something else. Something massive. Something moving. It was coming from the edge of the solar system, from the direction of the Council's ships. But it wasn't the Council. It was something else. Something darker. The man at the center of the room stared at the screen, his face pale, his hands clenched into fists. "Get them back here," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Now." The team raced back, the key clutched tightly in their hands. But it was too late. The thing on the edge of the system was moving faster than anything we had ever seen. It was coming. And it wasn't alone. The station went into lockdown, every system, every protocol activated. But it felt futile. How do you fight something you can't even understand? How do you stop a shadow? As the team docked and the key was brought aboard, the man took it in his hands, his eyes filled with a mix of awe and terror. This was it. This was our only hope. But would it be enough? The screens flickered, and the image of the approaching darkness filled the room. It was vast, shapeless, and utterly alien. And it was coming straight for us. The man turned to the team, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "We need to activate the key. Now." But how? The artifact had given us clues but not instructions. The symbols on the key seemed to shift and change as if they were alive. And as we stared at them, trying to make sense of them, the darkness grew closer. The station shook, the lights flickered, and the air grew cold. The Voidborn were here. And they were hungry. The man clenched the key tighter, his mind racing. There had to be a way. There had to be. But time was running out. The darkness was closing in. And humanity's fate hung in the balance. The screen went black and the room was plunged into silence. The only sound was the pounding of hearts and the faint, almost imperceptible hum of the key in the man's hands. And then, just as the darkness seemed to envelop the station, the key began to glow. The key's glow was faint at first, a soft, pulsing light that seemed to breathe in rhythm with the room's collective heartbeat. But as the darkness pressed closer, its light grew brighter, sharper, cutting through the suffocating black like a blade. The man holding it felt a strange warmth spread through his hands, a sensation that was neither comforting nor painful, just alive. The symbols on the key's surface began to shift faster, swirling and rearranging themselves into patterns that made no sense and yet felt eerily familiar. It was as if the key was trying to communicate, to tell us something, but the message was just out of reach. "What's it doing?" someone whispered, their voice trembling. No one answered. No one knew. The room was frozen, caught between hope and terror, as the key's light grew brighter and brighter. And then, just as the darkness seemed to swallow the station whole, the key screamed. It wasn't a sound, not exactly. It was a vibration, a pulse that resonated deep within every cell, every atom. The station shook violently and the screens flickered back to life, showing not the darkness outside but something else entirely. A vision. A vision of stars, of galaxies, of civilizations rising and falling in the blink of an eye. And at the center of it all, a single blinding light. The key's light. The man stumbled back, clutching the key as the vision overwhelmed him. He saw things he couldn't describe, things that defied logic and reason. He saw the Voidborn not as they were now, a shapeless, consuming darkness, but as they had once been. They were not born of evil, not in the way we understood it. They were a force of nature, a consequence of something far greater, something that had gone wrong. And he saw the seal, the ancient barrier that had held them back for eons, crumbling under the weight of time and neglect. But he also saw something else. Something that made his blood run cold. The key wasn't just a tool to repair the seal. It was a weapon. A weapon that could destroy the Voidborn, but at a cost. A cost that no one had anticipated. The vision faded, leaving the room in stunned silence. The man looked down at the key, his hands trembling. He knew what he had to do. But he also knew what it would mean. And he wasn't sure if he could bear it. "We need to activate it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But it's not going to be easy. The key, it's not just a key. It's a trigger. And if we use it, it won't just destroy the Voidborn. It'll destroy everything connected to them. Everything they've touched. Everything they've corrupted." The room erupted into chaos. "What are you saying?" someone shouted. "That it could destroy us too?" "I don't know," the man admitted, his voice breaking. "But if we don't try, the Voidborn will consume everything. The Council, the galaxy, Earth, none of it will matter. We'll all be gone anyway." The weight of his words settled over the room like a shroud. No one spoke. No one moved. The decision was too big, too impossible. How do you choose between certain destruction and the risk of destroying everything you're trying to save? And then the station shook again, harder this time. The screens flickered, showing the darkness outside, closer now, so close it felt like it was inside the room, inside their minds. The Voidborn were here. And they weren't waiting. "We're out of time," the man said, his voice steady now, filled with a grim resolve. "We have to try. We have to use the key." The team sprang into action, working frantically to connect the key to the station systems. It wasn't designed for this, none of it was, but they didn't have a choice. The key's light grew brighter, its pulse faster as it synced with the station's power grid. The man stood at the center of it all, the key in his hands, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the weight of humanity's fate pressing down on him, but he didn't falter. He couldn't. As the final connection was made, the key's light exploded, filling the room with a blinding, searing brilliance. The man closed his eyes, bracing himself for what was to come. But instead of destruction he felt nothing. Just a strange, almost peaceful stillness. And then the screens flickered again. The darkness outside was still there, but it wasn't moving. It was frozen, suspended in place as if time itself had stopped. The key's light pulsed once, twice, and then the darkness began to recede, pulling back like a tide retreating from the shore. For a moment it seemed like it was working. Like the key was doing what it was meant to do. But then, just as the darkness began to fade, the screens went black. The station's power grid overloaded, and the room was plunged into darkness. The key's light dimmed, its pulse slowing, and the man felt a cold, sinking dread in the pit of his stomach. Something was wrong. Something had gone terribly wrong. And then the screens flickered back on, showing not the darkness outside but something else entirely. A face. A face that was both familiar and alien, filled with a cold, calculating intelligence. It wasn't the Voidborn. It wasn't the Council. It was something else. Something new. "You should not have done that," the face said, its voice echoing through the room like a thunderclap. "You have awakened us. And now you will pay the price." The man stared at the screen, his mind racing. Who or what was this? And what had they just unleashed? The key's light flickered once more and then it went dark. The room was silent, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on everyone like a physical force. The darkness outside was gone, but the threat was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. And as the man looked down at the now dormant key in his hands, he realized the truth. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. And whatever came next, it would change everything. The room was silent, the air thick with tension. The face on the screen, cold, alien, and utterly unreadable, stared back at them, its words hanging in the air like a death sentence. "You have awakened us. And now you will pay the price." No one moved. No one breathed. The key, now dark and lifeless in the man's hands, felt like a betrayal. Had they just made things worse? Had they traded one nightmare for another? The man clenched the key tighter, his mind racing. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his chest. "What do you want?" The face on the screen tilted slightly as if considering the question. "We are the Keepers," it said, its voice echoing with an eerie, otherworldly resonance. "The ones who sealed the Voidborn. The ones who have watched over the galaxy since the beginning. And you have broken the seal." The words hit like a punch to the gut. The Keepers. The ones who had created the key, who had locked away the Voidborn eons ago. They weren't allies. They weren't saviors. They were judges. And they had just declared humanity guilty. "We didn't know," the man said, his voice trembling now. "We were trying to stop the Voidborn. We were trying to save ourselves." "Ignorance is no excuse," the Keeper replied, its tone cold and unyielding. "The seal was not meant to be broken. And now the Voidborn will rise again. The galaxy will fall. And it will be your fault." The room erupted into chaos. Voices shouted, arguments broke out, and the weight of what had just happened pressed down on everyone like a suffocating blanket. The man stood at the center of it all, the key still in his hands, his mind racing. There had to be a way to fix this. There had to be. And then an idea. A desperate, reckless idea. "What if we repair the seal?" he asked, his voice cutting through the noise. "What if we use the key to lock the Voidborn away again?" The Keeper's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something in its eyes. Surprise? Interest? "The key is damaged," it said. "Its power is spent. It cannot be used again." "Then we'll find another way," the man said, his voice filled with a determination that surprised even himself. "We'll fix it. We'll do whatever it takes. Just tell us how." The Keeper was silent for a long moment, its gaze piercing, as if it could see into the very soul of everyone in the room. And then, finally, it spoke. "There is a way. But it will require a sacrifice. A great sacrifice." The room fell silent again, the weight of those words settling over everyone like a shroud. A sacrifice. What kind of sacrifice? And who would be willing to make it? The man didn't hesitate. Tell us, he said. We'll do it. Whatever it takes. The keeper's gaze locked onto his, and for the first time, there was something almost human in its expression. The key was not just a tool, it said. It was a vessel. A vessel for the life force of those who created it. To repair the seal, to lock the Voidborn away again, you must give it life. Your life. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. The man stared at the keeper, his heart pounding in his chest. His life. That was the price. That was the sacrifice. The room was silent, everyone staring at him, waiting for his response. He looked down at the key in his hands, its surface cold and lifeless, and then back up at the keeper. If I do this, he said, his voice steady now, will it work? Will it stop the Voidborn? The keeper nodded. It will. But you must act quickly. The Voidborn are already awakening. If you delay, it will be too late. The man took a deep breath, his mind made up. He turned to the team, to the people who had fought alongside him, who had risked everything to get this far. You know what to do, he said. Finish this. Save the galaxy. No one argued. No one tried to stop him. They all knew what had to be done. And so they got to work, connecting the key to the station systems one last time, preparing it for the final, desperate act. The man stood at the center of it all, the key in his hands, his heart pounding in his chest. He thought of Earth, of the billions of lives that depended on this moment. He thought of the stars, of the galaxy, of everything they had fought for. And he thought of the future, a future he would never see but one that he could still save. As the final connection was made, the key began to glow again, its light faint at first but growing stronger with every passing second. The man closed his eyes, bracing himself for what was to come. He could feel the key's power now, pulsing through him, filling him with a strange, almost peaceful warmth. And then, with one final deep breath, he activated the key. The light exploded, filling the room, the station, the entire solar system. It was blinding, searing, overwhelming. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The man was gone. The key was gone. But the darkness outside, the Voidborn, was gone too. The screens showed nothing but stars, peaceful and unchanging, as if the nightmare had never happened. The room was silent, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on everyone. They had done it. They had saved the galaxy. But the cost was too great. And then, just as the team began to process what had happened, the screens flickered again. The keeper's face appeared once more, its expression unreadable. You have done well, it said. The Voidborn are sealed. The galaxy is safe. But know this, the seal is not eternal. It will weaken again. And when it does, the galaxy will need you once more. The screens went dark, leaving the room in stunned silence. The keeper's words echoed in their minds, a warning and a promise. The fight wasn't over. It would never be over. But for now they had won. And as the team looked out at the stars, at the peaceful, unchanging galaxy they had saved, they knew one thing for certain. Humanity would be ready. No matter what came next, no matter the cost, they would be ready. The silence that followed the keeper's final words was heavy, filled with a mix of relief and sorrow. The Voidborn were sealed, the galaxy was safe, but the cost had been unimaginable. The man who had led them, who had made the ultimate sacrifice, was gone. His absence was a void in itself, a reminder of what they had lost to secure this fragile victory. The team stood together, their faces pale, their eyes hollow, as they stared out at the stars through the station's observation window. The stars that had once seemed so distant, so unreachable, now felt like a silent witness to their triumph and their pain. The first to break the silence was the woman who had been the man's second in command. Her voice was soft but steady, carrying the weight of leadership she had never asked for but now had to bear. We need to report this, she said. Earth needs to know what happened. The galaxy needs to know. The others nodded, their movements slow, as if they were still processing everything. They had won, but it didn't feel like a victory. Not yet. Not when the price had been so high. But they knew they couldn't stop now. There was too much left to do. The message was sent, a detailed account of everything that had happened. The discovery of the key, the awakening of the Voidborn, the sacrifice that had sealed them away. The response from Earth was swift, a mix of gratitude and grief. The man who had given his life was hailed as a hero, his name etched into the annals of history. But for those who had known him, who had fought alongside him, the loss was personal. It was a wound that would take time to heal if it ever did. In the days that followed, the team worked tirelessly to secure the station, to ensure that the seal holding the Voidborn was stable. The keeper's warning echoed in their minds, the seal was not eternal. It would weaken again. and when it did they needed to be ready. But for now the immediate threat was gone. The Council's ships, which had lingered on the edge of the solar system like silent sentinels, began to withdraw. Whether they had been waiting to see if humanity would succeed or if they had been too afraid to intervene, no one knew. But their departure was a relief, a sign that the galaxy for now was at peace. As the weeks turned into months, life on the station began to return to a semblance of normalcy. The team, though forever changed by what they had been through, found solace in their work. They studied the remnants of the key, the fragments of the artifact, and the symbols that had guided them. They knew that understanding these things was the key to preparing for the future. The Keeper's warning was not just a threat, it was a call to action. The galaxy would need them again and they couldn't afford to be caught off guard. Back on Earth, the man's sacrifice became a rallying cry. His story spread across the planet, inspiring millions. Memorials were built, his name spoken with reverence. But more than that, his actions sparked a renewed sense of unity. Humanity, for all its flaws and divisions, had come together to face an unimaginable threat. And they had prevailed. It was a reminder of what they were capable of the strength that lay in their resilience and their willingness to fight for something greater than themselves. The woman who had taken over leadership of the team became a symbol of this new unity. She traveled back to Earth, sharing the story of what had happened, of the sacrifices that had been made. Her words were not just a recounting of events, they were a call to action. "The galaxy is vast," she said in one of her speeches, her voice carrying the weight of everything she had seen and experienced. "And it is filled with wonders and dangers we can't even begin to understand. But we are not alone. And we are not powerless. Together we can face whatever comes next." Her words resonated not just on Earth but across the galaxy. The Council, though still distant and enigmatic, began to take notice. They reached out, offering tentative gestures of cooperation. It was a start, a fragile bridge between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. And while the wounds of the past were still fresh, there was hope. Hope that one day they could truly stand together as equals. On the station, the team continued their work, their bond stronger than ever. They knew that the fight wasn't over, that the Voidborn were still out there waiting. But they also knew that they were not alone. They had each other, and they had the support of an entire planet, an entire species, behind them. And that gave them strength. One night, as the woman stood at the observation window, staring out at the stars, she felt a strange sense of peace. The man's sacrifice had not been in vain. They had bought the galaxy time to prepare to grow stronger. And they would use that time wisely. They would honor his memory by ensuring that, when the time came, they would be ready. As she turned away from the window, she noticed something on one of the consoles, a faint signal, almost imperceptible. She moved closer, her heart pounding as she recognized the pattern. It was the same signal they had received before, the one that had led them to the key. But this time it was different. Stronger. Clear. She called the team over, her hands trembling as she adjusted the settings. The signal grew stronger and then, suddenly, it resolved into a message. A simple message, but one that sent a chill through everyone who heard it. "We are coming." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The team exchanged glances, their faces pale but determined. They didn't know who was coming or what it meant. But they knew one thing for certain: they would be ready. As the woman turned back to the stars, she felt a strange sense of calm. The galaxy was vast, and the challenges ahead were greater than anything they had faced before. But they had faced the Voidborn and won. They had stared into the darkness and come out the other side. And whatever came next, they would face it together. The stars, once a symbol of hope and unity, now felt like a promise. A promise that, no matter what lay ahead, humanity would endure. They would fight. They would survive. And they would never stop reaching for the stars. The end.